Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to Now, Finale to the Shore. This is poem 16 of the 17 of Songs of Parting. It's interesting that in Leaves of Grass we have not in the title heard the word now as the very first word. We'll see this one more time in Sands at 70 at the very end, the first annex collection of poems with now precedent songs. But it is significant that we are coming now to what many believe is the real legitimate end of the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass. That in fact this poem, and then the poem to follow so long, is Whitman's true goodbye. Now, we're not going to make that argument. In fact, we're going to make the argument that you have to read all of the including poems at the end of Leaves of Grass, the first annex, the second annex, to have a real legitimate judgment on this. However, this poem and the one to follow, So Long, is genuinely a really good collection, two poems of final goodbye. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, our playlist. Everything from the inscription poems up to and including a set of introductory comments to parting. And then, of course, we just finished with these carols. Our Nortons will tell us about this little poem, that it was first published in the 1871 Passage to India. In a group of the same title, the poem appeared in 1881 with present title and text. 20 years after Now Finale was written, Whitman included it in Goodbye My Fancy, except for the first line. It terminates the small essay, A Death Banquet, and he introduces the poem with the following words. Now, this is Whitman, quote, "Like an invisible breeze after a long and sultry day, death sometimes sets in at last, soothingly and refreshingly, almost vitally. It is a curious suggestion of immortality, that the mental and emotional powers remain to their clearest through all, while the senses of pain and flesh volitions are blunted or even gone." End quote. Norton's finishes by pointing out that there is often in your text that little mark in finale to give that over the E. A peculiarity of the 1892 text is the use of the grave accent for finale in the title and in lines 1 and 2. The accent was, however, correctly omitted in the Norton's edition from the same word in Song at Sunset, line 54. And so I'll leave that one to you guys into your own study there. Now, I believe that we are at the end of Leaves of Grass, and we'll begin to say more about this, but I believe there are certain poets that are in the back of Whitman's mind, and I think one of those is John Keats. And we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net about Keats, and especially about When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. Of course, as he begins to recognize that he will possibly die young. You'll remember that he says at the very end, "Then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink." The fact that shore is used here is, I think, significant. You'll remember that this finale was used in starting from Paumanok number 5, in the base of all metaphysics, as well as faces, and then as was just mentioned by Norton's in Song at Sunset. Notice the repetition of the word for, the immediacy of this poem. It's a short poem, but it's in some ways going to set up the poem that will follow so long. Now, finale to the shore. Now, land and life, finale and farewell. Now, voyager, depart, much, much for thee is yet in store. Often enough hast thou adventured o'er the seas, cautiously cruising, studying the charts, duly again to port and hawser's tie returning. But now, obey thy cherished secret wish. Embrace thy friends. Leave all in order. To port and hawser's tie, no more returning. Depart upon thy endless cruise, old sailor. Now, it's almost as if Whitman feels like, at the conclusion of at least this part of Leaves of Grass, as we'll call it Songs of Parting, that he needs one last comment to himself and one last comment to his readers and to his book, and that will happen in So Long. The title, So Long, by the way, is a lot of study as to where it came from. Some argue that it's an old sailor saying, and notice that the last phrase of this poem is Old Sailor. Now, as we turn to the opening of this poem, the immediacy tells you, I'm aware this is coming. My death, my passage, my leaving and not returning. Now, finale to the shore. And I think there's a lot of Yeats' sailing to Byzantium here as well. That is no country for old men. I think Yeats borrowed heavily from a poem like this. Notice, now land and life, finale end, farewell. Of course, this idea of farewell will take us to the very last poem, as we now have it structured in Leaves of Grass, that farewell, goodbye my fancy, farewell. Now, and notice it's capitalized, Voyager, taking you back, of course, 4 poems earlier to the Untold Want. Now Voyager sail forth to seek and find. Notice capitalized, again taking us back to Homer and our Odyssey. Now Voyager, depart. And then in parenthetics, notice the stacking of the word much. Much, much for thee is yet in store. Of course, this is our Plato's Phaedo, the idea that there it is, sitting on the table is Socrates' hemlock shake. He's going to be drinking it in a moment, and he's going to go bye-bye. His disciples, his students, are all, of course, distraught and upset. He's excited, and they can't understand why he's excited. Well, he's going on his voyage, right? He has more in store. Notice the word yet. It's brilliant the way it's put there. For much for thee is yet in store. Often enough, and again, this use of the word enough in Leaves of Grass, we've paid attention to it already. Often enough hast thou adventured o'er the seas. Think about Passage to India, obviously. And then cautiously cruising. Think of how cautiously cruising and curious all kind of merge in the way he loves to use the word curious in different parts of Leaves of Grass. Cautiously cruising, studying the charts, in other words, the pilot, right? Duly 27 times used in Leaves of Grass. To port in hawsers tie, returning. Of course, we think immediately of, oh, captain, my captain. But now, for the last now. Obey thy cherished secret wish. It's interesting the way he uses the word secret in Leaves of Grass, isn't it? And yet now, here it comes out, that his ultimate secret wish is to know, I wonder what happens after this voyage, the next voyage. I wonder, secret wish. Embrace thy friends. 12 times in Leaves of Grass the word embrace is used. You'll remember in Song of Myself number 2, a few light kisses, a few embraces, a reaching around of arms. I told you one of the chief motifs in all Leaves of Grass is this reaching, hugging, grasping, clasping, embracing here. Embracing, right? Embrace thy friends. So you're not alone, right? Leave, of course we have to smile with the title of the collection, Leaves of Grass. Leave all in order. In other words, what's he saying? Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Now, what is the all? And what is the order? I think in many ways he's talking about his collection of poems. In other words, for Whitman, it was hard to leave the shore, but it was even more difficult to leave his poems, because ultimately he began to see all these poems as not poems, but a poem. Not these chants as chants, but a chant. Not these carols as carols, but a carol. A collection that would be read as a single unified whole. And all of that now, he's going to argue, is in order. To port in hawsers tie, obviously he's now referencing the language of sailing. No more returning. Depart upon thy endless cruise. Again, we go from cautiously cruising now to endless cruise. And then it's old sailor. And for those of you who are going, wait a minute, old sailor? I know that I've heard this somewhere in Leaves of Grass. Go back to Eidolons and you'll remember old sailors' voyages. That is to say now, as we come to the end of Leaves of Grass, we find ourselves returning back to the beginning. And of course, T.S. Eliot's East Coker comes to mind. In my end is my beginning, right? No question. Now, what are we going to say about this one at 2a? Well, I think the argument that's being made here is that sooner or later we all have to go on our next voyage. No question about that, right? And so it's a matter of preparation and a willingness to say goodbye to one's friends, to accept that all is in order, and then to depart. At 2b, I love the repetition of now 4 times. The echo of embracing 12 times in Leaves of Grass, and here we come back to it one more time, and his mention of friends. I've mentioned Keats, when I have fears that I may cease to be, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sing. This idea of sailing and leaving, and death is sailing. Of course, we mentioned Yeats sailing to Byzantium, the 1928 publishing. That is to say, and therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. What is beyond death? What's on the other side? Finally, at 3b, how do you gotta own a poem like this? Do you see your life as a voyage, as an endless cruise? And at what point do you think you become an old sailor? And is that an age thing? Is that a wisdom thing? I mean, what is that for you guys? Okay, guys, on to now So Long, the last poem. Thank you.